The rival house did not retreat. That was the first mistake everybody almost made. Not Kenny, never Kenny, but nearly everyone else. When the enemy advance halted at the edge of the western agricultural border, half the Valkrest command chamber exhaled like the war had already ended. Officers looked relieved. Nobles whispered with smug satisfaction. One elderly military advisor even muttered something about the reputation of Reach being sufficient to resolve unnecessary conflict. Kenny heard him. Of course he did. He simply didn't respond. He stood before the capital's main war display, arms folded, watching red enemy markers hold position across the western ridgeline. 78,000 troops. 4 armored divisions, 6 mobile artillery batteries, limited air support, a dozen command vehicles, enough to overwhelm Valkrest, not enough to defeat Reach. But dangerous armies didn't always need to win. Sometimes they only needed to be stupid in the right direction. Mira stood beside Celine near the rear of the room, quietly watching everything unfold. She hated how familiar the palace felt. The floors, the columns, the banners, the smell of polished stone and expensive flowers. As a child, she had once thought this place was enormous, a whole world contained beneath ceilings so high they vanished into shadow. Now it felt smaller, colder, less impressive. The palace had not changed. She had. That helped. A little. Kenny tapped 2 fingers against the edge of the display. They're not retreating. Lord Valkrest stiffened nearby. They stopped advancing. That is not the same thing. The older man didn't answer. Kenny looked toward Ellie. Ellie had claimed one side of the tactical table like it had personally offended her. 3 Valkrest officers stood nearby, waiting for instructions despite technically outranking her inside their own military hierarchy. She pointed toward the western ridgeline. They're regrouping. Kenny nodded. Yes. Aurora stepped closer. Her hair was tied back into its usual long ponytail, though several strands had already escaped because apparently the universe liked testing order. Waiting for reinforcements? Ellie shook her head. Maybe, but not first. Plum leaned over the map from the wrong side. Then what? Ellie expanded the terrain scan. Several thin blue lines appeared across valleys, woodland trails, and abandoned irrigation channels. Recon. Aurora's eyes narrowed. Ellie nodded. They'll want to know what Reach brought. Plum grinned. So they're spying. They're assessing. That's fancy spying. It's organized intelligence gathering. Fancy spying. Aurora smiled faintly. Ellie gave up. Kenny looked toward the map. They'll send small squads ahead. Already likely, Ellie said. Western Forest? Best approach. How many? Ellie considered. 8 to 12 per squad. Plum straightened immediately. Oh, Aurora noticed. What? Plum smiled. Nothing. Ellie stared at her. You're already hoping we find one. That is a rude accusation. You are smiling. I'm emotionally complex. Aurora cracked her knuckles once. The sound was quiet, but everyone heard it. Kenny looked at his daughter. She met his gaze. No words passed between them. None needed to. He knew exactly what she wanted. He also knew why. The last proper fight Aurora had been in was the Eclipse. Since then, her life had become cities, settlements, ceremonies, grief, politics, and infrastructure meetings. She had grown into leadership, but leadership had not dulled the blade, not even close. Kenny looked toward Plum. Take Aurora? Plum's grin widened. With pleasure. Ellie immediately frowned. I'm coming. No, Kenny said. Ellie blinked. Aurora blinked too. Kenny gestured toward the war table. I need you coordinating tactical oversight. If a recon team is moving through the western forest, I want you tracking their route and feeding positions. Ellie hated that this made sense. It showed on her face. Plum leaned toward Aurora. She's making her tactical sulk face. Ellie pointed at her without looking. One day, I will design a prison specifically for you. Plum looked delighted. Will it have snacks? No. Then it won't hold me. Aurora smiled despite herself. For a moment the room almost felt normal. Then the enemy markers pulsed again. Reality returned. Kenny's expression hardened. Find out what they're doing. Aurora nodded. And if they engage? Kenny looked at her. The ruler vanished. The father remained for half a heartbeat. Then both became something older, something forged in another eclipse. If they threaten civilians or reach personnel, Aurora finished it. They don't leave. Kenny nodded once. Aurora turned. Plum followed immediately. The two left the command chamber without another word. Ellie watched them go, then looked back down at the map. All right. Her fingers moved across the display. Let's find the fancy spies. The western forest outside the capital had once been part of Valcrest's royal hunting grounds. Aurora hated that fact the moment she learned it. The trees were old, beautiful, tall silver-barked things with wide leaves that shimmered blue-green in the wind. Streams cut through the forest in narrow channels. Soft moss covered fallen stone markers. Birds flickered between branches like tiny scraps of color. It should have been peaceful. Instead, every path carried the memory of nobles chasing animals for entertainment, while villages nearby struggled under taxes. Plum crouched beside a broken trail marker, nose wrinkling. Rich people ruin forests. Aurora glanced down at her. You just realized? No, but I like confirming things. Aurora scanned the tree line. Her body felt awake in a way it hadn't for months. Not tense, not afraid, ready. The forest spoke in tiny movements. Wind, leaves, water, distant insects. A bird taking flight too suddenly. Aurora raised one hand. Plum stopped instantly. For all her chaos, Plum knew combat silence better than most soldiers alive. Aurora tilted her head. The world narrowed. There. A snap. Too deliberate to be animal. Too controlled to be civilian. Plum's grin slowly returned. Fancy spies? Aurora nodded. Fancy spies. They moved without speaking. Years of training together turned movement into language. Aurora took the higher ground along a mossy slope. Plum slipped low through the trees. Ahead, shadows moved between the trunks. 8 figures, black and gray armor, no house banners, no visible insignia. Professional, not soldiers marching. Recon operators. They moved in pairs, scanning for patrol lines, shield anchor points, possible landing zones. One carried a compact mapping drone folded against his back. Another carried signal spikes. One held a long-range scope, aimed toward the capital's outer shield tower. Aurora's jaw tightened. Not lost, not wandering, not refugees, enemy scouts. Plum signaled from below. 8. Aurora nodded, then pointed. 2 at the rear. 3 center, 2 left, 1 command. Plum nodded. The command scout suddenly lifted a fist. The squad froze. Aurora went still. The leader turned his head slightly. Not toward Aurora, toward Plum. Plum had not made a sound. But the man was good. Better than expected. He whispered something. The squad spread. Aurora sighed quietly. So close. Then the nearest scout raised his weapon toward Plum's hiding place. Aurora moved. She dropped from the slope like a shadow with teeth. The first scout barely turned before Aurora hit him. No blade, no gun, just her elbow driving into his throat with enough force to collapse his breath. Her knee took his leg. Her palm caught the back of his head. The ground finished the rest. Plum exploded from the brush at the same moment. Surprise! Subtlety died instantly. A scout swung toward her. Plum ducked beneath the rifle barrel, grabbed his wrist, and used his own momentum to spin him into a tree. The crack echoed through the forest. 2 others opened fire. Aurora phased through the first burst. For half a second her body blurred, the rounds cutting harmlessly through the space she had stopped occupying properly. The scout hesitated. That hesitation killed him. Aurora closed the distance and struck his chest plate with both palms. The impact drove him backward. Before he recovered, she twisted, hooked his arm, snapped it across her shoulder and slammed him face first into a rock. Plum laughed from somewhere nearby. 2. Aurora blocked a knife slash. Don't count. Why not? Because you'll make it annoying. 3. Aurora rolled her eyes. A scout lunged at Plum from behind. Plum dropped flat. The attacker stumbled over her. She kicked upward with both boots. He flew backward into another scout. Both crashed down in a heap. Plum sprang to her feet and pointed dramatically. Double discount, the command scout shouted. Reach. That changed everything. The remaining scouts realized who they were fighting. Not random patrols, not palace guards. Aurora Reach, champion of the 12th Eclipse, Plum, Sparkle Doom's chaos engine wrapped in purple hair. Fear entered the forest. Aurora saw it. So did Plum. The command scout grabbed a transmitter. Contact confirmed. High-value targets. Repeat, high value. Aurora's dagger struck the transmitter before he finished. Sparks burst across his hand. He cursed. Aurora approached slowly. You really should have kept walking. The man drew a short blade. Plum appeared beside Aurora, wiping dirt from her cheek. To be fair, we also followed them. Aurora looked at her. Not helping. I'm adding nuance. The command scout backed away. His eyes flicked between them. You're outside your jurisdiction. Aurora smiled coldly. This planet is under Reach humanitarian protection. We are conducting lawful reconnaissance. Plum burst out laughing. The sound startled birds from the trees. Aurora's smile vanished. You aimed weapons at us. The man's grip tightened. You discovered us. Yes. Aurora stepped closer. That was your second mistake. He lunged. Fast. Good footwork. Military trained. Aurora slipped aside. Plum moved at the same time. The fight lasted less than 10 seconds. The command scout swung at Aurora's ribs. Aurora caught his wrist, turned under his arm and drove him toward Plum. Plum met him with a punch to the jaw so heavy it sounded like a door slamming. He staggered. Aurora swept his legs. Plum caught his armor strap and slammed him down. He tried reaching for a hidden pistol. Aurora crushed his hand under her boot. Third mistake. He looked up at her, blood on his teeth, hatred in his eyes. You think this changes anything? Aurora crouched. No. Her voice was calm. It confirmed something. What? She looked around the forest, at the fallen scouts, at the signal spikes, at the drone, at the direction they had been moving. Your house wasn't stopping. The scout smiled. Barely. That was answer enough. Then he activated something hidden in his sleeve. A pulse flashed. Plum's eyes widened. Bomb? Ellie's voice cracked through Aurora's communicator. Move! Aurora grabbed Plum. Phased. The pulse detonated. Light ripped through the forest. Not fire. Signal. A flare beacon launched upward, punching through the canopy in a bright red column. Aurora and Plum rolled behind a stone ridge as the pulse passed over them. The command scout laughed once, then Aurora ended it. The forest returned to silence. Smoke drifted from the beacon trail above the trees. Plum sat up slowly. Well, Aurora stood. Ellie? Static crackled. Then Ellie's voice returned. I saw it. Aurora looked toward the rising red flare. Did they get a message out? Yes. Plum winced. Bad? Ellie paused. Depends how you feel about being bait. Aurora smiled grimly. Fantastic. Plum dusted herself off. I love personal growth. While Aurora and Plum fought in the forest, Mira walked through the east wing of the Veilcrest Palace. She had not meant to. At least, that was what she told herself. She had left the broadcast chamber needing air. Then one hallway had become another, then another. Until suddenly she stood somewhere no map was needed. The servants' corridor. Plain stone, lower ceiling, less decoration, warmer somehow. The main palace had always felt like a museum pretending to be a home. These corridors had felt alive. People worked here, laughed here, shared food here, gossiped here, protected frightened children when noble parents were too busy being important. Mira stopped outside a small kitchen entrance. A memory struck with sudden force. She was 9, barefoot, hiding beneath the preparation table while two servants pretended not to see her. Her mother had been furious that day. Something about posture. Something about embarrassing the family during a visiting delegation. Mira couldn't remember the exact offense. She remembered the fear. She remembered the cook sliding a honey biscuit beneath the table without looking down. She remembered thinking that kindness was quieter than cruelty. Mira? The voice was older, soft, disbelieving. Mira turned. A woman stood near the kitchen doorway holding a tray of folded cloths. Her hair had grayed. Her face carried more lines. But Mira knew her instantly. Tessa? The tray almost fell. The woman set it down quickly and rushed forward. Then stopped herself at the last second, as though suddenly remembering Mira was now royalty from another house. Mira hated that pause. She stepped forward and hugged her. Tessa froze, then hugged her back tightly. Oh, child. Mira closed her eyes. The words undid something in her chest. For a moment she wasn't Mira Reach. Wasn't an adopted daughter. Wasn't a political statement. Wasn't the woman who had renounced a throne on every screen across the planet. She was a little girl being given honey biscuits in a corridor nobody important ever visited. Tessa pulled back with tears in her eyes. Look at you. Mira laughed softly. I know. You came back. I did. Not for them. Mira looked toward the grand hallway. No. Tessa nodded. Good. The bluntness made Mira smile. Servants appeared slowly, one by one, an older gardener, a laundrywoman, a footman who had once smuggled her books, a kitchen hand who used to make her soup when she refused formal dinners. They gathered carefully at first, then warmly. They asked if she was eating, if she was sleeping, if House Reach treated her kindly. That question made Mira cry. Not because it hurt, because she could answer it easily. Yes. The servants relaxed. Like that mattered more than the war, more than politics, more than titles. Tessa touched her cheek gently. Then I can breathe. Mira smiled through tears. Did you all know? Nobody asked what she meant. Tessa's expression changed, softened, saddened. We knew enough. Mira nodded. Why didn't anyone say anything? The question escaped before she could stop it. The corridor went quiet, not guilty. Painful. Tessa lowered her hand. We were servants. The words were simple, terrible, true. We could comfort you. Her voice cracked. We could hide biscuits under tables. A sad smile. We could loosen dress seams when your mother ordered them too tight. Mira laughed once through tears. We could leave doors unlocked when you needed to run. Another pause. But we couldn't challenge them. Mira looked down. Tessa reached for her hand. I am sorry. Mira shook her head immediately. No. You deserved more. Mira squeezed her hand. So did you. That silence held years inside it. Then a sharper voice cut through the corridor. How touching. Every servant stiffened. Mira turned. Lady Valacrest stood at the far end of the hall, alone. No guards, no attendants, just her, perfectly dressed, perfectly cold, perfectly unwelcome. The servants immediately lowered their eyes. Mira noticed, and hated it. Lady Valacrest walked forward slowly. You always did prefer inappropriate company. Mira straightened. They were kind to me. That was their employment. No. Mira's voice sharpened. Kindness was never in their contract. Tessa looked down quickly to hide her smile. Lady Valacrest's gaze flicked to her. Leave us. Nobody moved. That was new. The older woman noticed. So did Mira. Lady Valacrest's eyes narrowed. I said leave us. Mira lifted her chin. They can stay. For a heartbeat, the old power structure tried to breathe, then failed. The servants stayed. Lady Valacrest's expression hardened, but she did not argue. Not here. Not now. Not with the entire planet watching House Reach tear old rules apart. She stepped closer. We need to speak privately. No. Mira. You don't get to use that tone anymore. The sentence surprised even Mira. It landed cleanly. Lady Valacrest inhaled through her nose, then forced a softer expression. It looked unnatural on her face. Mira, this has gone far enough. Mira stared. The woman continued. Renouncing your claim was dramatic. Dramatic? Publicly embarrassing your birth house was unnecessary. Mira almost laughed. Unnecessary. That was what her mother called truth when it inconvenienced her. Lady Valacrest lowered her voice. But it can be corrected. Mira went still. What? You can take the Valcrest name again. The corridor became colder. Even the servants seemed to stop breathing. Lady Valacrest stepped closer. Not immediately, not publicly, but once this crisis passes, we can begin restoring what was damaged. Mira stared at her. You mean your reputation? Our house. Your reputation. Lady Valacrest's jaw tightened. You are still blood. The word hit wrong, like a hand reaching through a locked door. Mira stepped back. Lady Valacrest noticed and softened her voice further. Worse. You are still my daughter. No. You are. No. Mira, no. The final word echoed down the servants' corridor. Lady Valacrest stopped. Mira felt something old rising. Not fear, not anymore. Rage. Clear, bright, long overdue. You don't get to say that after what you did. Lady Valacrest's face hardened. We did what was necessary. Mira's laugh was small and broken. Necessary? Your behavior endangered this house. My behavior? You abandoned your duties. Mira stepped closer. I joined people who loved me. You betrayed us. Mira's eyes filled, but her voice did not shake. No. She breathed once. You betrayed me. Lady Valacrest looked away. Barely. Mira kept going. You did it my whole life. A pause. Every cold word. Every locked door. Every time you made me feel like being your daughter was something I had to earn. The servants were silent, some crying now. Mira didn't stop. But that wasn't the end. Lady Valacrest's eyes returned to her. Mira's face changed. The memory arrived. A screen, a chair, blood. A gag, terror. Her boyfriend's eyes. Aurora's arms around her. The gunshot she had heard but not seen. The silence after. Mira swallowed. The nail was the broadcast. Lady Valacrest froze. Mira stepped closer. The day you tied him to a chair. The corridor went dead. The day you beat him. Tessa covered her mouth. Mira's voice cracked, but she forced the words out. The day you put him on my call. Lady Valacrest finally looked shaken. Not guilty. Shaken. Mira continued. The day you murdered him on camera because he helped me choose House Reach. A small sound escaped one of the servants. Mira's tears fell freely now. That was the nail. Her voice dropped. That was the nail you hammered into the coffin of House Valcrest. Silence. Absolute. And whatever part of me still thought maybe one day you could be my family. She shook her head. Died with him. Lady Valacrest said nothing. For once. Then another voice spoke from behind her. What did you say? Everyone turned. Kenny stood at the corridor entrance, Celine beside him. Neither looked like they had meant to interrupt. Both looked like they heard enough to wish they had arrived sooner. Mira's face collapsed. Not from fear, from realization. They hadn't known. Not all of it. Celine's eyes moved from Mira to Lady Valcrest, slowly. Dangerously. Kenny stepped forward. His voice was quiet. Too quiet. Explain. Lady Valacrest straightened by instinct. It was a house matter. Kenny stopped walking. No. The air changed. Everybody felt it. Even the servants. Kenny's expression remained calm, but something behind it went cold enough to frost the walls. You executed a civilian during an Eclipse communication privilege because he assisted your daughter. Lady Valacrest lifted her chin. He assisted treason. Kenny moved so fast nobody reacted until he was already in front of her. He did not touch her. He did not need to. The force of his presence alone made her step back. Treason? His voice cut the corridor apart. Against what? Lady Valacrest's lips parted. Kenny continued. Against a house that discarded her? Another step. Against parents who treated love like a weakness? Another. Against nobles so small they had to murder a young man on a screen to feel powerful? Lady Valacrest finally lost color. Kenny's voice lowered further. Listen carefully. The corridor obeyed. Do not ever again call that boy's loyalty treason. Silence. He showed more honor in helping Mira reach safety than your house has shown in generations. Mira started crying harder. Celine moved then. Not fast, not dramatically, but with purpose. She walked past Kenny and stood directly before Lady Valacrest. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Lady Valacrest tried to regain control. Lady Reach! Celine slapped her. The sound cracked down the corridor. Everyone froze, even Kenny. Lady Valacrest stared, stunned. Celine's hand lowered slowly. Her voice remained soft. That made it far worse. That was for calling yourself her mother. Lady Valacrest touched her cheek. Celine stepped closer. This is the only warning I will ever give you. Her eyes shone with fury and tears. You will not ask Mira to reclaim your name. You will not call her ungrateful. You will not suggest she owes you love, loyalty, blood, or silence. Lady Valacrest trembled. Whether from anger or fear, nobody knew. Celine continued. You had a daughter. A pause. You made her survive you. Mira broke completely. Kenny moved to her instantly, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. Celine did not look away from Lady Valacrest. Reach will save your civilians. Her voice hardened. But do not confuse mercy for forgiveness. Lady Valacrest looked at the servants, at Mira, at Kenny, at Celine. For the first time in her life, perhaps, she had no room left to perform. No audience willing to believe her. No power strong enough to silence the truth. She turned and walked away. Nobody followed. The corridor remained still. Then Tessa stepped forward. She looked at Mira, then bowed. Not deeply, not like a servant to nobility, like one person honoring another. One by one, the others did the same. Mira cried silently. Celine turned and wrapped her arms around her daughter. Kenny stood beside them, his hand still on Mira's shoulder. For a long moment, the palace was quiet. And for once, its silence belonged to Mira. Aurora and Plum were still in the western forest when Ellie arrived. She came in a low-flight tactical skimmer that landed roughly 30 meters from the battlefield. Aurora looked up from where she was crouched beside the destroyed mapping drone. Plum sat on a fallen log eating something from a pouch. Ellie stepped out, saw the bodies, saw the scorch mark from the signal flare, saw Plum eating. Her eyes narrowed. Please tell me that's not from one of them. Plum looked offended. It's dried fruit. With you, I have to ask. Aurora stood. 8. Ellie nodded. I counted from the drone feed. They were recon. Yes. They sent a flare. Also yes. Plum raised a finger. Technically, the dead one sent a flare. Ellie ignored her. Aurora wiped dirt from her cheek. Did it transmit? Ellie held up a small device. Enough. Aurora didn't like that answer. What does enough mean? It pinged your location, confirmed reach high-value personnel in the field, and likely sent partial combat data. Plum brightened. So they know we looked cool? Ellie stared. They know you were operating outside the capital shield. Less fun. Aurora looked toward the western ridge. They wanted to know if Kenny could be baited. Ellie nodded slowly. Possibly. Or if Sparkle Doom could. Aurora looked at her. Something in Ellie's expression had changed. What happened? Ellie hesitated. Plum stopped chewing. That alone was alarming. Aurora stepped closer. Ellie? The platinum-haired woman looked toward the capital. It's Mira. Aurora's face hardened instantly. What did they do? Her mother tried convincing her to take the Valcrest name back. Plum stood so fast the pouch fell from her hand. She what? Ellie continued. Mira refused. Aurora exhaled slowly. Good. Then Mira told her why. The forest seemed to still. Ellie looked at Aurora. She told her about the broadcast. Aurora's stomach sank. Plum's face lost all humor. Ellie's voice softened. Kenny and Celine heard. Aurora closed her eyes. For a moment she was back in Reaper headquarters. Mira screaming. Aurora holding her. The recording cutting off. The silence afterward. Plum whispered, "Oh no." Ellie nodded. "Yeah." Aurora opened her eyes. "How bad?" Celine slapped Lady Valcrest. Plum's eyes widened. Then she nodded slowly. Correct response. Kenny verbally dismantled her in front of the servants. Aurora almost smiled. Almost. Also correct response. Ellie looked toward the bodies. And now we have this. Aurora followed her gaze. 8 dead recon scouts. A transmitted signal. An enemy army waiting beyond the ridge. Mira's mother exposed. Kenny and Celine fully aware of the murder. Everything had shifted in one afternoon. Aurora picked up the damaged signal spike. Then we report. Plum cracked her neck. Then what? Aurora looked toward the capital. Then Dad stops waiting. By the time Aurora, Plum, and Ellie returned to the palace, the war room had changed. Not visually. The same maps glowed. The same officers stood around displays. The same nobles whispered in corners. But the air was different. Heavier. Sharper. Kenny stood at the center of it. Celine was beside Mira near one side of the room. Mira looked exhausted but steadier. That mattered. Aurora wanted to go to her immediately, but first came the war. She stepped forward and placed the damaged signal spike onto the tactical table. Every officer looked at it. Kenny did not. He looked at Aurora. Report. Aurora straightened. Enemy recon team found inside Western Forest Approach. 8 operators. No visible house markings. Equipment included mapping drone, signal spikes, and long-range capital observation gear. Ellie added. They confirmed reach high-value personnel outside Capital Shield. Plum lifted a hand. And tried to kill us. Kenny's eyes moved to her. Plum nodded. So we killed them back. A Valcrest noble made a horrified sound. Plum turned. What? Nobody answered. Kenny looked back to Ellie. Transmission? Partial combat data. Location ping. High probability enemy command now knows Sparkle Doom is operating forward patrol. Kenny nodded slowly. Good. Aurora blinked. Good? Kenny looked at the map. They wanted information. His fingers moved across the display. The enemy ridgeline expanded. They got fear. Nobody spoke. Kenny tapped the western approach. They halted to measure us. Another tap. They sent recon to find weakness. Another. They found my daughter and Plum. Plum looked quietly thrilled to be considered a battlefield hazard. Kenny continued. Now they know Reach is not hiding behind palace walls. His eyes lifted. And they know we know they continued hostile operations after being offered withdrawal. The room changed again, because everyone understood. The rival house had made the next move. Kenny was simply answering. Lord Valacrest stepped forward carefully. What are you proposing? Kenny didn't look at him. An assault. The word landed cleanly. Valacrest officers straightened. Nobles began whispering. Aurora felt something inside her settle. Not excitement. Not bloodlust. Clarity. Kenny expanded the map. Reach forces will strike their forward artillery batteries before dawn. Ellie immediately stepped closer. Air or ground? Both. Kenny pointed to 3 ridge positions. Disable artillery. Cut armor mobility. Capture command vehicles if possible. Aurora nodded slowly. Drive them back. No. Kenny's voice hardened. Drive them off planet. The war room went silent. Lord Valacrest looked stunned. Kenny finally turned toward him. This is no longer a border dispute. His gaze swept across every officer in the room. This rival house entered Valcrest territory, threatened civilian populations, continued hostile reconnaissance under humanitarian protection, and attempted violence against Reach personnel. Another pause. They were offered arbitration. A final pause. They chose escalation. Celine stepped forward. Her eyes were still red from earlier, but her voice was steady. Then we end the threat before more families are forced into shelters. Kenny nodded. Exactly. Ellie was already working. If we strike before dawn, their thermal cover is weakest. The ridge fog lifts at 4:30. Their armor line will be exposed for approximately 12 minutes. Aurora moved beside her. Ground teams? Kenny looked at her. No unnecessary heroics. Aurora smiled faintly. That wasn't an answer. It was a warning. Noted. Plum leaned in. So, Kenny sighed before she finished. Yes, Plum, she grinned. I'm on ground team? Unfortunately. Rude but accepted. Ellie pointed at the ridge. Aurora and Plum take forward disruption. I coordinate from mobile command. Reach Marines hit the artillery line. Air support cuts retreat lanes. Aurora looked at Mira. Mira had been quiet. Watching. Thinking. Aurora expected fear. Instead, she saw focus. Mira stepped toward the table. Their recon signal used a narrow band burst. Ellie turned immediately. You caught it? Mira nodded. Partially. She pulled up a frequency trace. If I can mimic the tail end of the transmission, I may be able to feed them false follow-up data. Kenny looked impressed. What kind? Mira's fingers moved across the display. That sparkled doom remained in the forest. Aurora slowly smiled. Mira continued. That Reach command is still defensive. Ellie caught on instantly. And that the forward artillery ridge is unobserved. Plum looked between them. Translation? Aurora grinned. They'll think they're setting the trap. Mira's eyes sharpened. But it's ours. The room went quiet. For the first time all day, Mira Valcrest's old palace watched Mira Reach become something far more dangerous than an heir. Useful. Brilliant. Free. Kenny smiled. Do it. Mira nodded. Celine touched her shoulder gently. Mira leaned into it for half a second, then returned to work. Aurora watched her. Pride warmed through the tension. The next arc had truly begun, not with a throne, not with old blood, with chosen families standing inside a broken house, preparing to protect people who had once been told they were beneath notice. Kenny looked across the war room. All Reach units prepare for coordinated assault. The order moved instantly through command channels. Ships shifted in orbit. Ground troops armed, pilots launched. Medical teams prepared casualty routes. Evacuation lanes widened. The entire machine of Reach woke with disciplined purpose. Kenny's voice carried across the room. At dawn, we removed the invading force from Valcrest soil. He looked toward Aurora, toward Plum, toward Ellie, toward Mira, then finally toward the map. No civilian targets, no unnecessary destruction, no revenge, a pause, but no hesitation. Aurora nodded, Plum grinned. Ellie began issuing orders. Mira launched the false signal. Celine stood beside her daughter. Outside the palace, the capital glowed under emergency lights. Beyond the city, enemy troops waited in the dark, believing they had paused long enough to understand Kenny Reach. They had not. By morning, they would understand Sparkle Doom too.